When people find out that my parents are from two different countries and that I was born in a third country, the first question I get asked is, where is home? And for the longest time, I didn't have an answer. Until now. For those of you who are new here, a quick recap. My mother is Finnish, my father is American, and I was born in Germany. We had quite a nomadic lifestyle. When I was 3 years old, we moved internationally for the first time, and I wouldn't spend more than 3 years in a country at a time until I turned 18. If you want to hear how that affected me as a child, I made a video about that a few weeks ago. When my parents decided to move again after I turned 18, I just didn't go along. I had started college, I had a long-term partner, and I just didn't want to go. Germany always felt like the home, because throughout my life, we would always come back to the same country, same city, same house. My dad would get a project in the US, for example, and then we'd move there for a few years, and then come back to Germany. So it kind of makes sense for me to think of Germany as my home, but I was never really sure. I had stayed there out of default. That's where I grew out of my parental guidance, so I never really chose to live in Germany. Also, I felt a bit of a disconnect between me and the Germans that I spent time with. I didn't really partake in a lot of the German culture. Didn't watch German TV shows and movies. I'm really not into soccer, and generally I didn't feel like I fit in. I always attributed it to being Finnish. If someone would say like, oh, you're so quiet or melancholic, I'd respond with, well, I'm Finnish. I always felt more of a connection to my Finnish side than I did to my American side. So for the 13 years I lived in Germany, I always thought that Finland would be my home. So when the opportunity arose almost 2 years ago, I took it and moved to Finland. Finally, I was going to feel right at home with my quiet and melancholic people. But I didn't. I guess it's part of this whole nature versus nurture thing. When I'm in the forest here in Finland, it's different than being in the forest in Germany. It's hard to explain, but it feels different. It feels comfortable, like home, weirdly. But maybe that's just my nature coming through. However, when I met people here in Finland, I realized it wasn't my nationality that made me feel like I didn't fit in with the Germans. It was my upbringing. Nurture. Finns who have lived in Finland their entire lives have a different worldview, a different upbringing, and different interests than I do. When they talk about songs that every Finn knows, they're surprised when I say that I've never heard of them. They assume that I know about certain events that have happened here, or how to do simple things like what app to use for which bus service. Then I realized I knew all of those things for Germany. I mean, obviously, right? I kind of grew up there, and I had just moved to Finland. But it goes to show that home isn't necessarily a place, but rather a feeling. It can be a place, of course, but I wonder if that place has to be connected to a feeling. If you haven't moved around a lot and your parents still live in your childhood house, it's easy to call that place home, right? Because you associate that place with comfort, security, and love. So that's why people like me who don't have a physical place that reminds them of these feelings have trouble calling a single place home. Same goes for people who come from broken homes. If your parents divorced during childhood, it might be hard to say whose household to call home, if you can at all, or even worse. If you come from an abusive household, you might never have felt comfort, security, and love. So obviously you wouldn't call that place home. When I moved into this apartment, I didn't call it home. It was honestly kind of ridiculous, but I actually made a point of never calling it home. I would send people texts like, I'm on my way back to the apartment instead of, I'm on my way home. All because I didn't feel at home here. I felt like an outsider in Germany, and then I felt even more like an outsider in Finland. But feeling comfort, security, and love is what I consider home. And in Germany, I felt comfortable, secure, and loved. The German language comes naturally to me. I had a job, an apartment, and I knew my way around. My parents lived close by, and I had a partner. And all of that went away when I moved to Finland. So, stands to reason that I was homesick. It took me almost 1.5 years to call this place home. And it only happened after I met somebody. Through meeting her, I became more active. I would go into Helsinki more often and started getting to know the city better, and I fell in love with it. She convinced me that my Finnish was much better than I thought, so I felt more comfortable using it. We met some of her friends, I got to know new people, and slowly but surely, I started feeling all of these feelings again. So suddenly, I could call this place home. It just felt right. In just a few months, I went from planning on how I'd get back to Germany as fast as possible to seeing a future here in Finland. I also finally decorated this place. It's not a lot, but I went to IKEA, got a few things, and made this place just a little nicer. But I don't think I'll ever stop seeing Germany as home. Maybe henceforth it will be seen as my first home, because those feelings don't just go away. Just last weekend I met some German speakers at the book fair in Helsinki, and speaking to them in German just made me feel so happy and warm inside. But what do you think? Is where's home an easy question for you to answer? Or does your answer start with a deep breath and a, well? Let me know in the comments below. The Alphabet Superset, the challenge that I'm doing right now, is taking a break next week. So I will see you in 2 weeks.